A default could have disastrous consequences for the economy and global financial markets, as well as for millions of Americans who rely on government payments such as Social Security, Medicare, and federal salaries. The debt ceiling is a limit imposed by Congress on the amount of debt that the U.S. federal government can have outstanding. As of May 2023, the debt limit has been set at $31.4 trillion, but the Treasury has already reached that limit and has no room to borrow under its standard operating procedures. If Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling, it could lead to a default. A default means that the U.S. would not be able to pay its bills in full and on time. This could affect interest and principal payments on U.S. debt, which are considered the safest and most reliable investments in the world. A default could also delay or reduce payments for Social Security, Medicare, veterans' benefits, and federal salaries, among other obligations. These payments support millions of Americans who depend on them for their livelihoods and well-being. A default could also trigger a recession and a financial crisis. The U.S. economy and the global financial markets rely on the stability and credibility of the U.S. Treasury market. A default could undermine that confidence and cause interest rates to spike, credit markets to freeze, stock prices to plummet, and the value of the dollar to drop. This could hurt businesses, consumers, investors, and foreign governments who hold U.S. debt. The U.S. has never defaulted on its debt before, so the exact consequences are unknown and unpredictable. However, experts agree that it would be catastrophic and unprecedented. The last time the U.S. came close to defaulting was in 2011, when Congress raised the debt ceiling at the last minute after a prolonged standoff. Even then, the uncertainty caused by the brinkmanship led to a downgrade of the U.S. credit rating and a loss of $19 billion for taxpayers due to higher borrowing costs. The debt ceiling crisis is avoidable and unnecessary. It is not a tool for fiscal responsibility or spending control, but a political weapon that puts the U.S. economy and reputation at risk. Congress should act swiftly and responsibly to raise or suspend the debt ceiling before it is too late. The debt ceiling is a legal limit on how much the federal government can borrow to pay its bills. If Congress does not raise it by June 1st, the U.S. could default on its obligations and trigger a global financial crisis. But some Democrats have suggested that President Biden could bypass Congress and order the Treasury to keep borrowing money based on the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. This amendment says that the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. They argue that this gives Biden the authority to ignore the debt ceiling and prevent a default. But this option is controversial and risky, as it would challenge the constitutional authority of Congress to control the purse strings, and could face legal challenges from Republicans and backlash from investors. The Constitution gives Congress the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States, and the Supreme Court would likely uphold this power if challenged. Moreover, history shows that Congress has always set some form of a debt limit since the founding of the Republic, even after the 14th Amendment was ratified, and therefore, using the 14th Amendment to solve the debt ceiling problem would risk a constitutional crisis that could undermine the credibility of the U.S. government and its ability to borrow money in the future. The situation could escalate into a constitutional crisis, which is a fight among branches of government that has no clear resolution within the constitutional system. Here are some possible scenarios that could trigger such a crisis. President Biden could invoke the 14th Amendment to declare the debt limit unconstitutional and order the Treasury to keep borrowing money to pay the nation's bills. This would be a controversial move that would likely face legal challenges from Republicans and conservative groups, who argue that the Constitution gives Congress the power to borrow money, not the president. Some Democrats have urged Biden to take this step, but he has expressed caution and said he thinks he has the authority, but it would be challenged in court. Congress could fail to raise the debt ceiling by June 1st, when the Treasury Department runs out of extraordinary measures to avoid default. This would force the government to prioritize some payments over others, such as interest on the debt, Social Security benefits, military salaries, and health care programs. This would create chaos in the financial markets and the economy, and potentially trigger lawsuits from creditors and beneficiaries who are not paid on time. It could also damage the reputation and creditworthiness of the United States as a reliable borrower. Republicans could demand drastic spending cuts in exchange for raising the debt ceiling, as they did in 2023 when they passed a bill that would slash over $4.8 trillion in spending over the next decade. This bill was rejected by Democrats, who oppose such cuts to social programs and investments. If either side budges, the government could face a shutdown or a default, or both. Some Republicans, such as Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana, have advocated for spending cuts while benefiting from federal funds in their districts. The Supreme Court could intervene and rule on the constitutionality of the debt limit or the 14th Amendment option. This would be an unprecedented step that would raise questions about the separation of powers and judicial activism. The court could uphold or strike down either or both of these options, creating winners and losers among the political branches and the public. The court could also decline to hear any cases related to the debt ceiling, leaving the matter unresolved. Any of these scenarios could spark a constitutional crisis that would test the limits of the American political system and its ability to resolve conflicts peacefully and democratically.